If I was starting all over again in Christian leadership, these are the lessons I would want my younger self to know.
Because we all make mistakes. We have seasons where we doubt ourselves. And people say things about us that hurt.
Sometimes we question ourselves, God, should I even be doing this in the first place?
For us, these are some of the best things we've learned from some of our worst times in ministry.
10 lessons from 10 years as Christian leaders. Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's caffeinated, he's collared. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello, hello.
You can subscribe to the Pro Church Tools Show wherever you get your podcasts, and of course also watch full-length episodes, including this one on YouTube. We're going to go back and forth with our lessons from a decade each as Christian leaders. I'm going to go first. My first lesson that I have written down is plenty never lasts. And we're starting on a positive note because this is rooted in Ecclesiastes. Just wait till we get to Alex's. I read them this morning. No, I read the first three and I was like, I'm done. I can't read anymore. So some of mine are positive, but this one, not so much. Ecclesiastes 3. The lesson here, plenty never lasts. And this was really crystallized for me when I was listening to 50 Cent's autobiography. You got to stop. It's too early for this.
Yeah, I know.
And he says, quote, "You won't always be on top. The public moves on. Identify that and accept it when it comes. Don't fight it. Diversify." So this is in respect to 50 is like the biggest performer in the world, basically.
My sisters just actually saw him a couple weeks ago in South Carolina.
Praise God for that.
It was the day we were leaving. Rebecca and I were visiting, and somehow this concert came across one of their phones, and one of them looked at the other one and said, 50 Cent's in Charlotte tonight. Like, are we going? And the other one was like, yeah, absolutely. So they saw 50 Cent in concert. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And he did the Super Bowl not too long ago.
Yeah.
And really that's kind of to the point of this. This quote, of course, is in the context of, okay, I'm the biggest performer in the world. And famously, 50 said, I will retire from rapping if I don't sell more records in the first week than Kanye does, because they had a release date on the same day. I think it was either like 13 or 16 years ago now. And Kanye outsold him. And that wasn't the last record that 50 ever made, but it was like a stain on his public image because clearly he had been usurped. And this happens in, actors, it happens in music, of course, it happens in fashion, it happens in pretty much everything where no one stays on top forever. And
Unless you're Taylor Swift.
Or Drake, apparently, because these two have kind of like bucked the trend and have really been on unprecedented runs of being on top. So I guess aside from those outliers, but even with them, they've had to reinvent themselves so many times. But what 50 did is he eventually became a producer, and he was behind the phenomenon of Power, and then he signs this like giant deal with that network, and he kind of like enters into this new thing. And I always just think about this from the context of like, how weird must it feel to be like the biggest in the world on something, and then by no fault of your own, almost ever, just you got a bit older, so you're not resonating with young culture as much, and young culture is driven so much like in the creative world, and people just don't care about you anymore. And you're like, I think I'm making just as good music, or I'm just as inspired by what I'm making. I think qualitatively, I've never been as good at this, but people don't seem to be resonating with it as much. And it's just, the lesson here is that plenty never lasts in the same way that the seasons change. And we love reflecting on the seasons because we think it's such a good picture of like the rhythms of life, and that's baked into creation by God. And if the 50 Cent analogy isn't resonating with you.
Give us a Christian lyric to back this up.
Okay, so this is from my favorite song by Hillsong, Seasons, quote, "Like the frost on a rose, winter comes from us all."
Yeah.
You thought I was going to make it Christian. Jon Snow, Game of Thrones, winter is coming. That's why we got the pastor over here. So the point being is that whatever you have going on, no matter how good it is, eventually things are going to be getting difficult again. Inversely, no matter how difficult things are now, things on the horizon are going to be better also. Plenty never lasts. I have this permanently on my body in the shape of a tattoo. It is. It's quite up high on the upper leg. Yeah. It's a slot machine.
Yeah.
And the point is that like no fault of your own. every day you're pulling that slot machine and you just don't know what's going to happen. And so you can choose to live by your values. You can choose to take care of whatever is in your control, but so much is out of your control. Plenty never lasts.
I was thinking a little bit about this concept just internally the other day, apropos of nothing not related to this. And I was thinking about how sometimes in church culture, when things are going really well, there's this sense of like impending doom that like, oh, things have been going well for me for too long. Like something is about to go wrong. And then inversely, if a lot of things are going wrong in your life, you have this hope of like, sometimes things, they've got to turn around, like the scales have to balance, the cosmic scales have to balance. And sometimes, I don't know, I think we believe that those rhythms are like, I don't know, dictated or imposed by the cosmic creator. Like, oh, things have been going too well for you for too long. Like something bad has got to happen, or same is true for the inverse. But I think it's more just like the seasonality of life. Like everything is season. Nothing is designed to last forever. We've talked about it in so many different contexts on this show. Like the trajectory of our lives is not intended to be up and to the right at all times. And that is, if we can acknowledge it and lean into it in a way, it becomes beautiful in the way that like right now in Niagara, the leaves are turning and it's physically beautiful to look at, but it is a sign that they're about to fall and it's about to be like really cold and really barren for a long time. But we know that spring will come again and that the winter does serve a purpose. Like winter lets the soil rest. So can you take a picture of your tattoo so I can put it on the screen here?
Yeah, we can do that. That's not the first time that I mention I have a tattoo that stamps one of these values on me.
Yeah.
But what you said reminded me of one more thing I wanted to add, because I've talked about this exact life lesson with my pastor, and he said something similar about like his church. He's like, hey, like, or about our church, about his journey at that church is like, hey, we have kind of these like 7-year cycles in church. This is how he's contextualized. He's like, we were like in like building this new building for a long time. He's like, and it was just like a 7-year drag. And he's like, when we got in that building, everything changed. And now it's like, no matter what we do, it just works. Everyone is like positive. No matter what ministry we want to try, it's just like producing fruit. It's just like harvest, 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 harvest. And he's like, that's probably going to be like the next 7 years where like things are going really well. And he's been at this church for decades. And his lead pastor has been there for even longer. And they've seen kind of this cycle. And so I think it's true of ministry just as it's true in, I suppose, virtually every arena of life.
Yeah. Okay, so my first lesson I've called Die 1,000 Little Deaths. So starting on an ecclesiastical note of sorts, I read a book in Bible college called The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And this phrase leapt out off the page to me in a way that not too many phrases have before. I've read a lot of books. I have underlined a lot of things, but this one, Braid, the way it leapt off the page to me, I can see what area of the page. I know it's on the left side of the page. I know it's on the bottom third. I can see where it is to the extent that just a few weeks ago, I was thinking about this and I wanted to read it in more context. I haven't touched this book in 5 years. I picked it off my shelf and I was able to find where it was in the book because I could see it. That's how formative it was.
Like you just opened the book and it was like, oh, it's page 126.
Not to the exact page, but I...
Roughly to the...
Yes, I scrolled. I knew it was in a chapter about service. So I scrolled to service and I just knew, I actually hadn't underlined it in that book, or maybe I had, but anyways, I knew it was on the left side, bottom third. And I found it and the chapter is about service. He's talking about the disciplines of being a Christian and one of those disciplines being devoted to a lifetime of service. And he defines service this way by saying like, in many ways, it feels like dying 1,000 little deaths. And that has been my experience in not just in active ministry, in serving church in many different respects, now leading a church, but just in Christian life as a whole, being a husband, a father, a friend, a son. The Christian life devoted to a life of service often feels like dying 1,000 little deaths. And similar to what we were just talking about in the sense of like plenty never lasting, if we cannot identify that and acknowledge that, it feels like almost an assault.
Oh, wow.
Like this is not the way, I feel like I'm dying. This is not the way that this should be. But if we can identify it and acknowledge it and hear the words of Jesus calling us to pick up our cross and identify with him in death, and all the other things that he said about in that vein, about laying our lives down, about the last becoming first, if we can embrace it, it's a cultivated skill. It's made easier by practice. Dying 1,000 little deaths doesn't feel good or easy at first, but when I learned to embrace it, I have found new, liberation in my life of service to Jesus and service of others. It has made the cross-carrying posture of being a Christian so much more tolerable, frankly. And it's funny you brought up a song lyric in your first lesson, so I'll do the same.
Oh, nice.
And the lyric goes like this. It's from an indie band called The Collection. They say, you pray for resurrection, but you're too scared to die. And isn't that the truth? That like we are always looking for new life, always looking for resurrection in some way, shape, or form, without acknowledging or admitting or embracing that for something to be resurrected, it first has to die. And so Christian life often feels like dying 1,000 little deaths. And Richard Foster helped me see that is not a bad thing. In fact, it is the way of Jesus. And when we submit our lives to that, we have the promise of you will not lose your life. You will retain your soul and gain eternal life.
We both went to the same post-secondary institution, and I also remember reading that book, and liked it a lot too. One of the standouts from the degree. I have another tattoo, and it is on my shin. It is the shape of a lightning bolt, and inside the lightning bolt is a skull.
It's one of my favorites of yours.
I know it's one of your favorites. I remember when you were like, "What the heck is that?" Though, and the entire idea is, Jesus saying, "You want to find your life, lose it. I'm going to elevate the weak," and that's like the paradox of the kingdom of God. When you lay your own life down, that's when your ministry becomes the most powerful. That's when you're at your most effective. That's when you're at the most faithful to Jesus. Get to my second lesson here, the compounding power of consistency. My scripture reference for this one is Galatians 6:9. Spoiler alert, I got a tattoo about this one. And you know what? Isn't it great? We're entering into the fall, into autumn. That means what? It's tattoo season, folks. And I've got a blank torso, and we are going nuts on it. And you won't even know because I got long sleeves on now. What's happening?
Until it starts creeping up out of your neckline.
Well, I am planning on getting, I don't wear a wedding ring, but I am planning on getting letter B for my wife, Brittany, on my finger. So they'll see that one.
Yeah.
So the tattoo that I have is kind of on the outer knee, and it's of a potted plant, and it's just this little sprout, little baby sprout. And then the potted plant is casting a shadow, and in the shadow is the plant grown to its full size. And the idea is that everything has this humble beginning. Great quote that clarifies this for me that I've repeated many times and will continue. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And the idea of compounding is traditionally talked about in the form of economics, right? Hey, if you start saving when you're a young person, interest is going to compound on top of itself. And then when you retire, you'll have all this money, even though you only put in relatively a small amount compared to what's there. But compounding exists across every discipline in life. The important consideration is that it exists in both directions. And so if I am continuing to make bad choices, those are also going to stack up on top of each other. And I always like to think of it as, because I'm a Canadian, a snowball rolling down a hill. And it can roll down the hill in a positive direction, and it can roll down the hill in a negative direction. And we've seen this. You can think of this in your own life. Like that person that just no matter what, things just keep going well for them. And perhaps that's luck. Perhaps there's something greater there, which is they just keep making the right small decisions every single day, and excellence begets better opportunities, which begets better outcomes, and it just becomes this cycle. Or that person that just they just can't seem to dig themselves out of that hole because they keep making decisions that are hurting themselves, and that snowball is going down this slope at a pace that how do you even stop that? It becomes that much more difficult the more and more it compounds, because it's not even the latest decision that's compounding. It's the outcomes of past decisions. That's the way the economics work. It's not the deposits that you've made 20 years in. It's the interest on the interest on the interest of the first deposit that is becoming more and more and more. And so the relieving part of this as well is that, hey, everything that's worth doing in life is hard before it becomes easy, and anything that's worth doing in life is probably going to take a long time. And you probably won't be able to do it in 1 year. But you likely underestimate what you can accomplish in a decade. And what's the title of this episode? 10 leadership lessons in 10 years. We've only been at this for a decade each. And I always say when we do these episodes, it's really nice to talk about these things, not because we have everything figured out. We've been at it for a decade. We know relatively nothing. But after a decade, you can know some things, and the way you perceive those things a decade in is going to be different than how you perceive them in 2, 3, and 4 decades.
Yeah, that's so good. My next lesson is actually kind of related to a show we did recently. We were talking about 3 of the most influential books on our Christian leadership, and one that you brought up, which is it's called Outlive, right? And there's this. I should say the lesson. The lesson is learning to die well. Learning to die well.
I don't think that was the takeaway from that book.
No, but the takeaway from this book is what? That we all are going to die.
Touché.
And we all hope that we're going to get the 70, 80, 90, 100 years that we think we're afforded. And the goal of this book in learning to live well and cultivating eating habits and activity habits now is to ensure that in the final decade of our life, we can do things that we want to do. We can live well at the end. And one of the most influential pastors in my life in describing distilling his pastoral ministry is to say that he believes his work is, you could answer that question in so many different ways. What is the work of a pastor? Is it to make disciples? Is it to build a church? Is it to this, that, and the other? And he says, well, I think that my primary function as a pastor is to teach people how to die well. And I thought that was so profound because it is, in truth, where we're all headed. And there are lots of things that we want to accomplish here and now for ourselves and for the Lord and for our ministries, for our families. But in the end, what matters and what we're all headed towards is the end of our experience, the end of our life. And he, in his estimation, all of his pastoral work is distilled down to that, which is teaching people how to die well, how to finish well, to use the Apostle Paul's language. Like, we're all running a race. And there are signposts and mile markers that we will pass as we run, but like the goal is the finish line. And the Apostle Paul finished well. This pastor I'm referring to, he has finished well. And that was his goal in pastoral ministry, informing the people that he was responsible for. And to me, that's been something that I've internalized personally in my value systems and the decisions I make on a moment-to-moment basis, month-to-month, day-to-day. How are these decisions I'm making as a Christian, as a father, as a friend, as a leader, contributing to setting me up to die well? And then in turn, as a Christian leader, in the folks that I'm responsible for, in our church, in my friendships, in my family, how am I building up people to not just succeed in what they're doing today, but, and to what you're saying about making deposits, compounding interest, how am I setting them up to run the race to the end and finish well and die well?
Before I move on to my third lesson, our 5th overall, halfway through, there was one program, I didn't get to earlier, and it's related to, we have an upcoming Social Sermons public enrollment period. And okay, the reason I wanted to mention this is because I very rarely like to do promotion before something is available. We'll wait till it is available,
right,
and then we will be very vocal about it for let's say a week, and then we move on. So usually we have 2 big enrollment or launch periods in a year. So 50 weeks are just normal stuff. And then there's 2 weeks where it's hey, there's this thing. If you want it, come and get it. The problem with that is that there are some folks that are hey, I work at a church. And there is certain logistics that we have to go through to get approval on things. And so in respect to that, I wanted everyone to know that we have a public enrollment period for Social Sermons coming in October. That is the plan right now. The original plan was to open again in January of 2024, but I have a very heavy travel season in January, February, and March, and it just didn't seem smart to open public enrollment then, especially because we have new packages. We've been building the
new website too. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can go check the new website, socialsermons.com. You can see the new packages and the new pricing there. The lowest package now has a lower entry point that's more accessible. To churches because we wanted it to be accessible to as many folks as possible, but we also are doing a lot more in respect to social media. Before we were just kind of doing vertical videos. Now we're doing text threads and quote posts and carousel posts. We're doing full-length blog posts, full-length YouTube videos, even like coffee table books that we like design and make for your church.
What are you even talking about?
Well, so okay, so
Just casually drop, yeah, we're making coffee table books.
yeah, so
You have to tell me about that.
yeah, it's true. You don't really spend too much time on this, so you don't really know.
Yeah.
This is not a bit. So, whoa, what's that? Like Alex.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're taking like longer segments of church's sermons. So let's say a pastor has 3 points. You know this. You're a pastor.
I'm aware, yeah.
So you might have 3 points.
Yeah.
You
3
know,
points on dying. for
Right.
sure.
They're all, you've got 3
My
points
third
on
one is
dying
about
here.
dying, yeah.
So usually each of those points, let's say, makes for a great standalone video because it's a standalone thought.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're taking, 6 to 20 minute portions of messages, depending on the overall length, timestamping those, and then turning those into YouTube videos. Those represent the ideal length of a first page YouTube video, which is roughly 15 minutes. We make this eye-grabbing thumbnail. We edit a compelling intro, kind of similar to the way that our podcasts have intros.
Okay.
And then we publish that with a search indexed title, optimized search title. So, maybe the title of the sermon, I was working on one recently, and it was, the title was like, your questions answered, foot washing, September 23rd, 2023. And I was like, yeah, that's like a typical, sermon video on YouTube. It wasn't even on the main channel. It was in the live tab. So like nobody ever sees it. So we took I think it was a 10-minute portion of that video, retitled it How to Handle Betrayal, made this awesome thumbnail, and that became the YouTube video. That was step one. Then we take that and we turn that YouTube video into a full-length blog post. We expound on that. You do that for a year, and you have these 52 essays that are basically capturing the journey that your church has been on in the past 12 months. So then we design that into a book, and the style of book is like, if you think about like those like Chanel, Louis Vuitton, like the beautiful like coffee table books, like they're like half a decoration, half a book. That's kind of the style, and then you can either sell it in your church to recoup the printing costs. You can give it away, but either way, it makes for this like beautiful embodiment. That was a tangent.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited.
You got me hyped up about
Yeah,
that.
so we're doing a lot more things, and we only had space for 100 churches when we launched. We have expanded our capacity. We have space for 50 more.
Okay.
When we launched in January of this year, those 100 spots were taken in the first week. So I anticipate the 50 spots being taken as well, which is why I want everyone to know, hey, it's happening in October. Make sure you're on the email list, and you will get notified, because we always let the waiting list and the email list know first when public enrollment happens.
Okay, I'll put a link in the description in the show notes for this to Social Sermons so people can get on the waiting list there.
Yeah, you can go to socialsermons.com. You can see all this stuff. We made these beautiful like recent work slideshows. You can click through to see examples of everything I'm talking about. What do you even mean by this? Like, you can see examples of all that and join the waiting list there. Okay, my third lesson, reassess problems from altitude. So if the first, it sounds like the bunch of lessons we've talked about so far are very like philosophical and mindset focused. This is about really practical. So maybe we should have provided context for this earlier. If you're listening or watching this episode for the first time, Alex is a pastor, bivocational. He works at our company. Our company is a church media company, and we have roughly 20 employees. And we have contractors beyond that, and we have multiple locations in multiple countries, and so there are many accountants. Anyways, there are a lot of things happening, and I am, like the top of the tree. And things happen, and you see them, and you feel anxiety, and you feel like this jolt of negative energy inside of you. And the best way I've come to dealing with these problems is reassessing problems from altitude. So if you are in the weeds, if you are in the moment, finding ways to step aside, that can be like, sometimes like I get a message like, oh, this guy sucks on his phone, on my phone. Like I get comments like that. Yeah. I just remember one that was exactly that. This guy sucks. And I thought to myself, I can't even do anything with this.
Maybe I do suck.
Like what about, like does he think, is it my countenance?
Yeah.
Is it how I talk? Is it the message?
Yeah.
Is it what I'm saying? Is it how I'm saying it? I don't know. This guy sucks. So like something like that. I was like, okay, I could respond and be like, no, you do. Or reassess the problem from altitude in that specific instance. Okay, this person isn't giving valuable feedback. They don't need to get a response. It's not going to profit me or them whatsoever. When you reassess that in almost a sober mind, right? Like when you wake up and you're tired and you have not had a good sleep, I have heard it described as similar to when you are like under the influence of a substance. In the same way, when you have like this jolt of negative energy from like this cortisol, it's just rushing through you when you see something like that, like you're not of sober mind. Reassess from altitude, get out of the weeds, get out of the dirt. And I don't have a tattoo for this yet, so maybe I'll get one.
So the thing that comes to mind, now we're workshopping tattoo ideas.
Okay,
the thing that comes to mind is, you know when you get like, I'm going to use the T word, but like, you know when you get triggered in the sense that something sets you off and your amygdala gets activated.
Sure.
And your brain becomes, activated to the point where you are disconnected from your logical brain, from your prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
And the idea in a moment like that is to get your brain back online. And so, this tattoo's got to have like a brain and like something going on there. But this happens not just in running a business, but like this experience of amygdala activated, brain offline, that's a universal experience for like anyone who's alive. We have a 2.5-year-old. This is his almost entire existence right now. It's like, like just being set off by something I was saying no to. And so the way we help him get back online is like some embodied practice, like whether it's like a big, long hug, deep breathing. He's really good at regulating with deep breathing. But like for adults, we got to figure out how to, because that was going to be my question to you, is like, how do you evaluate something from altitude when you are in the weeds? Like physically, you're in the weeds. How do you get up and out? Like as adults, we have to have means to accomplish this. And so for me, it's getting my feet like in nature. So if the rhythm of life or something is like really causing me to be activated and my brain to be disconnected and like offline from my prefrontal cortex, all I need is like some time, like an hour or two or more, but like sometime in a forest or like looking at a mushroom or with my like feet in the grass. That's one way for me to get myself back online. So I just want to ask you, like, when you are in the weeds and you know you need to get out to see something objectively and more rationally and evaluate something with facts and not feelings, how do you get there? What do you do?
Yeah, so two things, and what you just mentioned is one that I'll often do. Mushrooms not included. But I think those aren't always accessible to me.
Right.
And so there are even two easier things. And the first one is just whatever has like kind of activated that within me is just focusing on something else. So what I will tend to do, and what my wife will also tend to do, and this is why maybe we're not so great at it, because we both do it. So we don't have the other person to be like, you handle this better than me. No, we're both sickos. So like, I'll just stare at the phone and I'll stare at it and I'll stare at it and I'll look at a creative problem. And if I look at this enough, I can solve it. Because often that's what works. But sometimes you realize you're like, this has become not helpful. And so what I'll have to do is just focus on something entirely else. Okay, I need to start cooking dinner. I need to go pick up my kid, give them a hug. I need to go start cleaning up somewhere. I got to like wipe down the table or whatever. And the same is true for like when you really don't want to do something, just like taking the first step towards it. There's a reason why like productivity experts will be like, anything that takes 5 minutes or less to do, always just do it right away, because you can start to kind of build momentum. And if you're stuck on something negative, you can build momentum by like focusing on something else and just removing yourself physically and mentally from that situation. And it doesn't need to be as like robust as like, I need to get out to a different place, because maybe that's not possible for you. Putting on music is a great one. Just listen to a song that gets you in a different mood. What I found is like, I used to think that this was like not effective. Like I couldn't do it. Like, no, I'm locked in on this. I actually can't change. Like, no, I'm really easy to be distracted. I'm not nearly as like intense or firm on something as I thought. Like my brain's like, oh, cool, funny music. Oh, that's a fun beat. And so it can be as simple as that. And it's amazing how fast you'll respond.
Yeah, totally. Okay, my third lesson, our sixth. This is the third and final point in my 3-point sermon on death.
So he says.
But this one in the title doesn't have anything to do with death. I called it Be Where Your Feet Are, which is kind of actually related to what we're talking about here, about just needing to maybe change environments and places and paces to get grounded again. I call this Be Where Your Feet Are, and it is related to... It's related to death. It is related to dying well, in a sense that what I'm trying to say is pretty much reframing or summarizing what Jesus had to say about not being anxious about anything. And he says explicitly, he says, tomorrow is going to come will have its own anxieties and will be worth like maybe being anxious about tomorrow. But for today, like you don't have to worry about tomorrow. Today, be where your feet are. Because I've said it this way in a lot of relationships that I share, and I may have said it on the show before, but I'm a firm believer that like yesterday happened and was real. Tomorrow hopefully will happen. We know we're not guaranteed tomorrow, but hopefully it will happen. And when it does happen, it will be real. But as for today, this moment, the only thing that's like actually real is the moment you and I are sharing right now. Right? Like this morning when you got to the office and I was working on my computer and you were looking at your mail, like that moment was real and it was happening, but it is no longer happening. Tomorrow, when you come to the office again, we will share another moment and it will happen, hopefully. But neither of those moments are happening.
Yeah, if you think I'm coming to the office tomorrow.
But today, this moment is what we're sharing. And so said another way, like yesterday, the tragedy or the stress or the discomfort that happened, the thing that you are regretting or feel guilty about, that happened. And tomorrow, the worries that we have about what tomorrow is going to hold, will Brady come to the office or not? No. Will I be able to pay my electricity bill tomorrow? Or is my child going to survive the night? Like that is something that will hopefully happen tomorrow. But today, this is all there is. And so the principle here is be where your feet are. Be responsible for what is happening in this moment. Because as we've talked about with compounding interest, how we carry ourselves, how we act in this moment really does have a lot to do possibly with what does happen tomorrow. And so if we remain where our feet are, we actually shield ourselves from regret and guilt, things that have happened in the past, shame. And we also shield ourselves from anxiety and worry, things that are going to happen. But here we are, and we can face this moment together in the grace of God, resting in the fact that that the scripture says like he gives us our daily bread. Like there's enough for today. And we know that if tomorrow comes, there will be enough for tomorrow. But the present, in my estimation, is the only thing that is currently real. And so what am I going to do with it? Be where your feet are.
So how do you square this with like stewarding what you have wisely for the future and not, and like planning for the future?
Yeah.
Is your argument that living well now is the best way to plan for the future? It kind of seems like a cop-out if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it is something that I wrestle with, like in tension, actually, ironically, with the book of Ecclesiastes, which is like, well, everything's vain and like you're not taking anything with you. So, and so that is not to say whatever you have today, just like spend it all today, because we know that's not good stewardship. And so I am putting money away for retirement. You know, we are putting money away for Asher's education fund in hopes that he will go to school and that we will live to retirement age. And honestly, Brady, like sometimes I actually wrestle with that. It's like, how much am I putting away today for tomorrow when tomorrow's not even guaranteed? So I'm internally and now outwardly on the internet working through that. But I think for me, it's like when the sun comes up and as it goes down, what am I responsible for today? And what am I stewarding today? And am I stewarding it well? While also acknowledging that like preparing for the future in hope is a good thing to an extent. I wrestle with that.
Well, and all of these lessons are representative of things that we continually wrestle with. That's
Right.
what makes the lesson profound, is that it's helping us navigate a tension that assuredly doesn't have a clean solution.
Sure.
So I think that's in keeping with the themes here. Okay, lesson number 4. Another real practical one for you. Say the quiet part out loud. This is a quote directly from the values that we have here at Pro Church Tools. I'll read it. Quote, "We value speaking plainly. This could mean talking openly in difficult situations, not shortcutting conflict resolution, or simply refusing to let bitterness simmer by letting things go unsaid. Fundamentally, we don't believe in trying to hide the real thing we are trying to say." And we enacted this as a value in the company because we realized that if our goal was longevity, and to be clear, we don't operate like many other companies. So like the employees that we have are like the only employees we've ever had, and everyone's been here since day one. And we're like, hey, we hope we are here until the last day. And what we've realized is like, if we are going to be in each other's lives for that long, with money involved, with work involved, with like, hey, you didn't come through on your responsibility involved. We had to enact this aspirational value of saying the quiet part out loud, because if we didn't, we were creating an environment where things would be simmering below the surface, creating an environment for bitterness to form. And that's like rust to longevity. Bitterness would just completely undercut that and destroy that goal. And so, well, now we've had to have all these difficult conversations. Curiously, so I was talking with one of our social sermons employees, and they work remote, so they're kind of distinct from our in-person employees. And they were like, hey, Braid, like we're launching these new things. Like, here's some questions I have about the new products. And they were having a little skepticism, and they're listening to this podcast. and so this employee, who will go unnamed, although he did encourage me to use a moniker for him that I will not. He said, you know, like, what do you think of this? I don't really know if I agree. And then we had a church like sign up for that package. And as soon as it came in, I just screenshotted it and I said, suck it. In the general slide. And everyone was like, yeah. and then like a week later, first that church registered interest. And I booked a call with them, and they signed up. Because we always have like 2 or 3 open spots. So if there's a good fit for someone, we can bring them on. And then like it was a week later and they signed up, and I was like, in your face again. And he was like, I thought speaking the quiet part out loud I thought that was a good thing. Right. And I was like, it was a good thing. And now I'm speaking it out loud. You are my op, and I have manufactured controversy and difficulty, and I will overcome you. And everyone was like, yeah. And I was like, I might not
Maybe not the spirit of the value.
Maybe not the spirit. You know, these are kind of two different. I don't even know how to reconcile these two things. This is probably my flesh and then the spirit man that needs to overcome it. But like my most toxic trait is every day I hear a Drake lyric that I'm like, I'm gonna post this. And they're always like, you didn't believe in me, and now I'm gonna show you. Except written, in a nice poetic way. And every day I go, I don't know if that's coming from a good place. But I'm just gonna blindly move past that and keep going. So saying the quiet part out loud. And sorry to employ. He's like, is this ever gonna end? And I said, well, 6 years ago, one of our in-person employees played a big factor in me spraining my ankle quite poorly before our first employee got married the next day. And, I was all wrapped up on the dance floor in multiple braces and 8 Tylenol deep, and I was dancing too much and my ankle was just ruined. And that comes up how often?
About once a week.
Yeah, about once a week. Yeah. So I was like, look, sometimes, most of the time I'll move past something and forget it ever happened. But unfortunately, there are 1 or 2 occasions where something will forever be marked. Yeah. And, perhaps pray for me on that. Still room to grow.
Okay. We do embody this value at work, but we know that in our most treasured interpersonal relationships, our marriages, we work this out in our marriage, right? Because unspoken expectations is really where you get into trouble, not just in your marriage, but in any position of leadership, talking about church as well. It's not wrong to have expectations of people or of teams and such, but when they are unspoken expectations, when you don't say that out loud, then you'll be disappointed by the person who never had the chance to meet your expectation because you didn't have the courage to say it out loud. And so, Rebecca and I are 7 years into marriage, and we've found some real liberation in that, which is it's okay to have expectations of each other, but it's imperative that we do speak them out loud, even when they're hard, so that we're on the same page. And I'm not feeling disappointment by something that I never let you into. So we work that out in all different ways and forms and fashions. You mentioned prayer.
I did?
Yeah, you did. You said, pray for me. It's something you might need to work on.
Oh, nice.
And I'm done with death. I've got 2 more values here. And this one is I called pray without ceasing. And this comes from the Apostle Paul, famously says, defines himself as a man of prayer and encourages his listeners in the letters that he writes to be people who pray without ceasing, which seems
the Apostle Paul podcast. Yes, his listeners, yes.
Yeah. No, he would write letters and then they would be read and they would listen to the letters.
Oh, I guess I never thought of it that way. Dear listeners, listeners at Ephesus.
And so
like and subscribe. Leave me a 5-star rating. I'm trying to get out of this prison. It's real tough.
I really need some help here. No, what he was, he was himself and encouraged his followers, his disciples, his readers, to be people who pray without ceasing. And he embodies this in all of his letters. He says, more often than not, when he opens the letters, he says, I've been praying for you. I pray this for you. I thank God for you every day. And that seems like a tall task, to be a person who prays without ceasing. What does that mean? To literally be praying always, under my breath, or praying in tongues all the time? I don't know for any of our listeners who grew up in Pentecostal or charismatic circles, maybe you know that person who is often muttering in tongues under their breath, and it's what's happening here? But Eugene Peterson, I haven't mentioned him yet on the show, so I got.
Hey, mark this. He made it all the way to this point.
And it's fair to bring him up here because his book on prayer is renowned as one of the best modern books on prayer. It's called Answering God. And he talks about prayer. He talks about prayer in the context of language. So he says there are 3 languages. First language is intimacy. It's the language that you share with your parents as a child. Often it's baby talk. It's sounds that aren't even words. It's language that builds relationship. And then there's productive language that follows, a descriptive language, and then there's motivational language, getting somebody to do something with your words. But he talks about prayer, and he says prayer is language 1. Prayer is intimacy built with God. And his book on prayer is called Answering God because his thesis is prayer, all of prayer is just a response to what's already been said. God created the world with a word, and he is always speaking, always working. Our prayer is just simply a response. And so I say all of this to say that I've learned and I've learned this from my dad, and now, kind of being bolstered by Eugene Peterson's guidance, that as a pastor, as a Christian leader, as a person of faith who shares the ins and outs of life with people, prayer is being a person of prayer, or as Paul would say, being a person who prays without ceasing, is the thing. Eugene Peterson argues that when people come to your church, they don't want to be lectured, they don't want to be entertained. What they want is to be prayed for and to learn how to pray. And so prayer being language 1, this language of intimacy, this language of, and we know how if you're a parent, or even if you're not a parent, you've been a child, we know how we talk to our parents in infancy. Parents, we know how we talk to our kids in infancy. It's this unreserved, very casual, intimate relationship building, attachment building conversation. And Eugene Peterson says that's what prayer is. And that's what it always should be. It shouldn't ever really mature beyond that. And so as a pastor, as a person of faith, it's been my journey to be known by my friends and by the people in our church as a person of prayer, someone who is praying for you whenever you come to mind, someone who will pray with you when you come and ask for prayer, and someone who will teach you how to pray if you need help learning how to pray. And so this is an awfully spiritual one. This is less philosophical.
You're the pastor. That's what you're here to bring that. So.
Yeah, but pray without ceasing. Be a person who is always praying, not in the sense of door closed, on your knees, hands clasped, but life as a prayer, and being in communion with God and helping people along on that same journey as well.
Okay, so important question for you. You know how people that love Beyonce, it's what's that, the Beehive, the Hive? Okay, and then Taylor Swift, you have the Swifties.
Yeah.
Right? Any other names for fans come to mind? Those are the first 2 when I thought of them.
Yeah, those are the immediate ones that come to mind too.
Yeah, okay. So if you are in New Testament times, big fan of Paul. Couple options for you, okay? Okay. So you know how the Hive. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Paul's in prison. Okay, so his followers, they call themselves, they self-identify we're the inmates. Okay, that's option 1. Okay. Second one, little alliteration, just Pauline people.
Yeah, I love that.
We're Pauline people. Yeah. Now, third option, this is for the folks that they don't really like the direction that Paul went.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they're kind of let's go back to how it was. So they're Saul's soldiers.
Right.
They want to break out the swords again. Yes. They want to get back to the dirty business that they were doing. I think maybe we could work in something with Damascus, scales falling off. I think there's more that we can workshop, but of those 3, if you had to choose.
I can I interest you in Paul's prisoners?
Paul's prisoners.
Take that how you will. Yeah.
That combines the alliteration of the Pauline people with the inmates into one.
Yeah.
And maybe that's more, holistic, capturing the essence
Yes.
of the inmates.
That's right.
The Pauline people.
That's right.
Of Saul's Soldiers.
I'm not going with Saul Soldiers.
Shockingly, that wasn't one that you liked. Okay, final lesson here. And this came out of being a dad. And every day I drop my daughter off at school. She's in 3rd grade now. And I walk her to the fence and say goodbye. She gives me a hug and a kiss, and she goes in. And, we have these moments to talk, and we'll try to tackle problems. And over time, I realized that, like, every time that she leaves me, there's like a moment where she'll like remember these times. And I'm like, okay, what are the things that I want to stick in her head? And maybe I shouldn't think about this as much as I do, because it's weird what our brains choose to remember. It's like, oh, that was the thing from my childhood that I chose to remember. I'm sure my parents would be very, very unsettled that was the thing that sticks in your head. So I'm like, fine. Then I have to be intentional about what I say over and over again. And I can't say too many things. So one that I've been saying a lot recently is, hey, before it becomes easy, it first has to be hard. So she started clarinet this week, and it's been great for me, actually, because I do my writing at home in the morning, and she's not allowed to play clarinet while her sister, who's 14 months, is sleeping. But as soon as her sister wakes up at 7 a.m., that means the clarinet comes out, and she's great because she can make the sounds, and they're awful. So it's,
Yeah.
and she realized how she could like hit one of the clarinet notes. So she's like, woo, 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 woo. It's great. I'm getting more done than ever. Why did I bring that up? I got to reassess that from altitude.
Yeah.
So that was it has to be hard before it comes easy. 'Cause, Dad, am I going to be good at clarinet? And I was like, no. What? You've never done it before.
Right.
You can be good, but it will be hard before it is easy. And that gets back to setting expectations, which you said, dying a million times. Maybe I need to tell my daughter that, hey, you're going to die a million times doing this clarinet.
Yeah.
Expectations that things are going to be challenging.
Make sure to use that language too.
Yeah, that's useful. Yes. Yeah, I think she's at the age where her prefrontal cortex is very able to contextualize that. The first lesson, though, before we got to that I've been saying every time that I have an opportunity dropping her off at school is, hey, there's only 2 things you need to worry about. There's lots of questions you have to just only focus on 2 things. Just keep trying and be a good friend. Just keep trying and be a good friend. That
Inspired by Finding Nemo at all?
No, I don't think so.
It reminds me of Just Keep Swimming, which of course is Dory's common refrain. Of
course.
And she was a good friend from the beginning to the end.
That's not bad. Right. Hey, let's say subconsciously it was a Pixar inspiration.
Yeah.
Originally, I wanted it to be 3 things. And then I was like, wait, I don't need to manufacture a third. Because I was trying to remember my time in school. And like, school is tough. For many different reasons. It's amazing for some. It was amazing for me. But that doesn't mean it's not challenging.
Yeah.
I was like, if I could just like distill my entire experience in school, like how do you successfully navigate this jungle of like learning and socializing? Just keep trying and be a good friend. That's all you control. That's all that matters. And so I got a tattoo for this, and it's really high up on the thigh because I was wearing it out of space on the leg sleeve. And it's a little smiley face emoji going down a slide. And the reason is because I always see her go off to the playground when I tell her this. And I tell it to myself. Like,
Yeah, you don't grow out of that.
no, it's not. And I thought it was just for school at first. And then I realized, wait, that was ministering to me just as much as hopefully it's ministering to her and crystallizing in her mind that when she's 23 and dad's not there anymore, she's like, okay, just whatever it is, just keep trying and be a good friend. One, like put in the effort, work hard, but also like care for the people around you. Because at the end of the day, like I want to just keep trying at the work we're doing in this business to build it and to reach people and to influence and impact the world. But also, I just want to make good things with my friends. And if I ever prioritize like one over the other, I've missed something. They both kind of like need to, as much as possible, live in tandem, because I don't want to just like, let's just be a good friend. Let's just like slack off and not do anything. It's like, no. Like I want to work hard. I want to do stuff that really matters, and balancing the two.
That's so good. And I hope that when she reflects on this time as an adult, that is what she remembers. I have a sneaking suspicion that she's going to remember listening to Skater Boy on the way to school in the car.
Canadian legend,
Yes.
Avril Lavigne.
Yeah. Why the clarinet and not the, I don't know, electric grunge guitar so that she can play along to Skater Boy? There's no clarinet in Skater Boy.
Yeah, she is in guitar lessons.
Okay.
But she keeps coming back from them, being like, we played piano today.
What's going on there?
I don't know. She's like, I learned driver's license. And I was like, I didn't show you that song. That's not Lily's classics.
Yes.
That's modern classics. Band at school. So it was between clarinet and flute. Mom did flute, Dad did clarinet. And I was like, I think clarinet's going to be a bit easier for you as a third grader getting started. So.
Yeah, Asher's got a recorder. And so it's...
Yeah, I remember the recorder phase well.
Yeah, so I empathize with the just almost unbelievable frequencies that come out of that device at ungodly hours.
Britt said this morning, she said, this is better than the recorder. So timely.
It does have like a better, like what's the word, like timbre? Like,
yeah. It's not as shrill.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, my fifth and final, our 10th and final
take us home.
lesson we've learned in the last decade. And you've said it so well already, like this is by no means any sort of like an exhaustive list of the 10 Christian leader principles. Like we are just stumbling our way through trying to have influence in people's lives, and we're very young and very green. And so this fifth and final one, or 10th and final one, is kind of an appeal to that, and I call it follow the leader. And so to actually quote the Apostle Paul again, he has that famous phrase where he says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And I remember when I was younger hearing that phrase for the first time, thinking like, that's a little bit like presumptuous, isn't it? Like I would have a hard time saying that out loud about myself with a straight face. Cause it seems a little haughty, but in the entire context of what the Apostle Paul's life and what we know about him, like, I think we know enough to know that it wasn't like, it's not dripping with pride, but it's, I think what he's trying to say is I am doing my very best to follow the lead of Jesus Christ and my revelation of who he was and who he is. Come along with me. And I think that is, for Christian people that are in positions of Christian leadership specifically, and maybe I'm appealing a little bit to pastors here, is to always recall to ourselves that yes, we are leaders, but we're also being led. So like said another way, we are simultaneously shepherds and sheep. Like as shepherds, as leaders in Christian community, we never grow beyond being a sheep ourselves, never grow beyond being led ourselves. That's something I'm always reminding myself. And actually, I make an effort to say this often in our church, to remind our church as well, that like, you are not following me in the sense that like, I know the best way forward on my own. I happen to have the microphone right now, and I'm asking you to come along with me as
a Pauline prisoner.
Yes, as I follow the example of Jesus. And so, you know, it's an appeal to remember as Christian leaders, pastors, whoever, whatever your function is in Christian leadership or leadership at all, is that yes, we are leading people along, but we are also and always pilgrims too on our own journey. And so not only does that help to keep Jesus in his rightful place, which is the one leading the journey, but it also gives us grace when we make a misstep, because we're not setting the path, we are trying to follow along. And in the same way that there are grace for the people who are following along with us to make missteps and grace to call them back onto the way, we are also pilgrims too. We are also following along the lead too. And so when we make a misstep, the road ahead is already paved. It's been paved by Jesus. And so as we are leading, we are also following the leader.
Well, that's a great way to leave things off. And, you know, to all the Pauline prisoners out there, bless you. All of us Saul's soldiers, our time will come. Don't give up the fight. Thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust. And we'll talk to you next week. Oh, yeah, by the way, 5 a.m., I sit down and I look in here. I'm like, all right, what has he got in here? Die. Related to die. I was like, oh my God, this fucker.
I didn't notice that until an hour ago. I was just going over my notes again, and I was like, wow, these first three are really all about dying.